we are violating the very gospel of God, because the gospel of God is for all the people. Turn back with me to Isaiah chapter 9 again. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. The people walking in darkness. Now to a Jew that would have been the Gentiles. To the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. The government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And then in chapter 11. Verse 12. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish. Judah's enemies will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, nor Judah hostile toward Ephraim. They will swoop down on the slopes of Philistia to the west. Together they will plunder the people to the east. They will lay hands on Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be subject to them. The Lord will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea with a scorching wind. He will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it up into 7 streams so that men can cross over in sandals. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people that is left from Assyria, as there was for Israel when they came up from Egypt. I will praise you, O Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. And do you know what the term is for that? Yeshua. Yeshua. God is my salvation. Do you know that we would pronounce Yeshua in Hebrew as Joshua, but in Greek it's Jesus. 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 God is my salvation. Jesus. God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of what? Salvation. In that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. He will raise a banner over all the nations, and they will draw from the well of salvation. Why? Because God is our salvation. Yeshua. Jesus. Jesus. It's all because of grace, Paul says. Grace is the unmerited favor of God. It's receiving from God what we don't deserve. No longer is it performance-based. No longer do we have to do certain things in order to be accepted by God. Paul will say in Romans 15:7, accept one another then just as Christ has accepted you. Grace goes back to what we said at first. God did it. And God does it. That's grace. The scope is universal. No one is excluded. Paul was writing to a church that contained both Jews and Gentiles. Paul had been called as the apostle to the Gentiles particularly, and he excluded no one. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm glad that we don't have to become Jews first like some in Galatia were trying to get the people to do. Well, in order to be a Christian, you have to first go through the ritual of circumcision. You have to first become a Jew, and then you can become a Christian. That's not what the gospel is all about. The gospel is that it was brought to everyone. That God so loved the world. The world. But for us, that means there's no room for prejudice. There's no room for exclusion. Which is one of the reasons Jesus got in trouble so often. Because he hung out with those that were unclean. Those that were unworthy. Sinners, they were called. Which prompted him to tell 5 parables in Luke 15 and 16. The first one you're familiar with because I quote it almost every Sunday. And that is the parable of the lost sheep. All the sheep did was get lost. It was the shepherd who found the sheep. The woman with the lost coin, the coin didn't do anything except get lost. It was the woman who found it. The son got lost. It was the father who ran out to greet him and embrace him. And then we come into the 16th chapter and everybody wants to change subjects, but it doesn't. It continues on because these are stories that Jesus told all together, and that is the story of the rich man and Lazarus. It has nothing to do with teaching about eternal destiny. It has everything to do with self-righteous religious people. If you look at that story, Jesus said the rich man did well in this life. Lazarus was an outcast. He was unclean. The dogs came and licked his sores. He longed just to get a few crumbs from the rich man's table, but the rich man wouldn't even give him the time of day because he was unworthy. Then they both died. The rich man was dressed in purple and fine linen. Do you know who wore purple and fine linen? The priests. The religious folks. And they would have known that. But where was Lazarus? Well, he was in the bosom of Abraham. And the rich man, dressed in purple and fine linen, found himself in torment. Jesus is not dealing with what happens in the afterlife as much as he is telling the religious people, guys, you think that you're going to get there because of your own righteousness. But let me tell you something. All these folks that I'm with, that you accuse of being sinners, they're going to be in better shape than you are. That's what that story is about. And so you see, for us, there's no exclusion. We can't look down on anybody and say they're not worthy, because Jesus came to save sinners, as we saw from that passage in 1 Timothy. I don't know about you, but that includes me. And I'm so grateful for the passage in the Old Testament that says, underneath are the everlasting arms. How low can you go? I don't know. Some of us in this place have gotten pretty low at times in our lives. But the promise is that underneath, no matter how low we go, underneath, if we go to the very depths of the grave, underneath are the everlasting arms.